Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We are very sorry there wasn't an episode last week. We just didn't get around to actually filming one, but there'll be two this week, so it should make up for it. There'll be a couple of them. But today we have been asked to talk about coronavirus, very pressing issue, clearly. A lot of people want to know what it's like in England, how our lives have changed because of coronavirus. Do we miss life before coronavirus? All of those sorts of things. So we thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion today about said topic. We're gonna start off, I think, by telling you guys like what coronavirus was like in England last year when it first started, and how it was for us when we were in our first lockdown, and obviously how it's sort of developed over time. I don't know if you know any, but I don't really know much about like statistic wise.
I one thing maybe that you realize that we did not do is do in-depth research before we do these podcasts, so we're not going to be quoting statistics and exact dates and things at you,
especially just because it's more, I think you guys want to know more about our experiences rather than, you can Google the statistics, but you can't maybe Google what people in England were going through, I suppose, at that time. And then we'll just tell you a little bit about what it's like now. I don't think it's it is obviously different, but obviously it's still a big issue, like it is everywhere. So do you maybe want to start off by saying what it was like last year?
Sure.
Because it started in March, right?
Yeah, so on the whole, like the general trajectory of the virus has been the same in the UK and sort of most of Europe, and kind of like dipping in and out of lockdown. But the UK has just commemorated a year since like what most people will call as since the virus like officially began in the UK, because on the 23rd of March last year, so 2020, that's when we went into our first lockdown. So a few days ago there were like memorial sort of things done in the UK for people like marking 1 year since we first went into a lockdown, and we've had 2 official lockdowns.
I think so. Yeah, we had weird stuff, didn't we? Because we had the first lockdown, which lasted until
about March till June. So that was a long one.
It was like a good length, and then there was maybe June to September. They really eased the restrictions. We had this thing called Eat Out to Help Out in the UK, which was our government encouraging us to go out places, go to restaurants again to help the economy, and basically you got 50% off all your food, all your drinks, during Monday to Wednesday, or there was something like that. There was a couple of days a week for about 12 weeks that you could go and do that, but obviously that really worsened the cases because everybody was out socializing, eating, so then we went into another one.
We got a generally free summer. You just had social distancing and masks in place, but like you could do pretty much what you would normally do. But so I think we then went back into another one like September.
It was definitely the end of September because my birthday is the 25th and I wasn't in a lockdown for my birthday. There was still restrictions, but I was able to go out for my birthday. I think it was maybe like the very start of October that we went into another little mini one. I think that one was only a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a very long one. And then obviously we came back out again. So we've had the 2 official ones.
Yeah, because the first lockdown was national, and all the restrictions were always national. And then at what point did the tier system come into play?
I think that was after the second lockdown. We had this thing that Olivia's just said, the tier system, where basically our government
system that Austria had.
So our government said you were in tier 1, 2, 3 or 4. Was it 4 was a really bad one?
I can't remember how they labeled.
They just kept adding them, didn't they? They were like, you're in tier 4 now, but actually you're getting
1, 2, and 3. And it was really funny the way that they labeled them, because like it was like bad, really bad, and really, really, really bad. And I heard there was just there was something really funny. I mean, I can't remember what this was. There was something really funny about the way that they labeled them. But and so it's like 1 was the easiest restrictions, 2 was medium, 3 was end of the world. And then they created a tier 4, and
everyone thought they were going to add a tier 5.
Tier 4 going to do that. Actually, I remember that because I was not at home for that. So that came in when I was when I'd already moved here. And
I was in the UK for that, because I think in Newcastle we were in tier 3, because I was in Newcastle living with my parents at the time, and I think we were in tier 3 for a lot of it. But yeah, when they started having tier 4s and everyone was like, blooming heck, there's going to be tier 5s and tier 6s. It's just going to keep going.
Yeah, I think what was funny about it was I think that tier 1 was called medium, as in like medium alert level, and that's why it was
there
really
was no 0.
So it was like tier 1, which is the lowest, but was medium level, and then you had tier 2, which would be the middle of 1, 2, and 3, but that was high. It was just a really stupid way of labeling it. But yeah, those different tiers had different levels of restrictions, and really like London and the areas around London were essentially just always in the highest. There was like the Isle of Wight was just chilling on tier 1 for like the entirety of that lockdown period, because I've got a couple of friends that live there, and they just, I think it was the Isle of Wight they'd essentially managed to get, because they're an island, so the Isle of Wight is an island off the south of England, and I think obviously the perk of being a small island off of something that's already an island is they just stop people coming in and out, just closed themselves off, got down to 0,
to get rid of it,
and then we're like, we're all right, we're just gonna stay here. Because I just remember,
I think that happened in the Isle of Man as well, because I've got a friend who lives in the Isle of Man, and she was like, oh yeah, you know, we don't have to wear masks, we don't have to socially distance, because there's nobody, you know, nobody here has it.
Genuinely no coronavirus on that island.
Yeah, but obviously the situation was so different in England. And what do you remember from like March last year? Because I think March last year for me was such a weird time. So I was having a few personal issues with flatmates at university at the time. So when March hit, I was very excited to be able to go back home. I was able to quit my job and just, so I think they went into lockdown. So we got an email from our university on the Saturday, and I was at work at the time. And I remember talking to my workmates in Donal, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they've shut down the uni's closed. They've told us we're all online now. We don't need to be in Liverpool anymore. And because I was having these issues, I just wanted to like leave straight away. My manager said, yep, fine, like get someone to cover your shifts and you can go home. Like that's no problem at all. So then on the Sunday, my mum drove up. She helped me pack. Well, drove down from Newcastle. She helped me pack up all my stuff, and we moved out on the Sunday. So I only knew on the Saturday and then moved out the Sunday. And then I think we went into lockdown like the week after, which for me, I just remember it happening so fast. Like there was no, oh, I get to say goodbye to my friends and I get to say goodbye to Liverpool. It was pack your stuff and go, because you're not going back. It was a very like abrupt ending to my second year of uni. So I remember it being like a very, very weird situation, especially because before uni as well, like I hadn't lived with my parents since I was 18, and then going back as a 20, nearly 21-year-old, having been 2 years independently living and all of that sort of stuff, to then move back in with your parents, who obviously see you as their child, and you have to be with them 24/7 because you're not allowed to leave the house because of this lockdown, was like a very, very stressful, very, very difficult period. So what was it like for you? What do you remember of it?
My end of term was really, really weird, because my terms always end like the first week of March. So I was like I'd already gone home from uni when like there were rumours of things of like a lockdown, and coronavirus wasn't serious at all. So we have to pack up and move out at the end of each term anyway. So like I already was moving all of my stuff home, but we were like, all of us were then speculating like, when might we be back? And some people were like, well, we'll be back at the beginning of term surely. Others were like, oh, maybe halfway through. And some people were like, no, like I really don't think we're going to be coming back. But I think mostly we thought we'd have at least a few weeks back in the end of the summer term, but obviously no. So I think I like packed up and went home around about like the 10th of March. But like I kind of finished that uni term perfectly normally, and then was talking to friends at different universities who were like, my university's closing, my university's not said anything yet, like my university's saying we're going to stay.
It was really up in the air, wasn't it? Like some unis were like, yeah, let's close. Some were like, we're not sure, we think we're going to do a mix. But luckily mine was like, yeah, you can go.
Yeah, and one of my friends has like severe health problems. It means that she's like specifically vulnerable to coronavirus. And then she was like, well, my university's still going for the time being, but I don't know if I should be going in, because like now I'm really like concerned about mixing with other people, and I don't think I should go in. So that was that massive like uncertainty time. And then so we got to the end of March and actually went officially into lockdown. But amusingly, masks didn't become obligatory in shops and places until like the end of June.
Oh yeah.
I now can't remember like I can't remember like what that was like. So I think everyone was wearing masks, but it wasn't
like a legal requirement, but everyone was wearing.
It wasn't a legal requirement. I don't remember being in lockdown and going into a shop without a mask on.
No, I don't either.
April, May, June, we had 3 months of being in lockdown before that was a legal requirement, which now looking back makes absolutely no sense. If you're going to take the extreme step of putting the whole country in lockdown and then not making it legally enforced that you have to wear masks in shops and things, that's actually crazy.
I remember, speaking of shops, do you remember as well at the start? So in England, I don't know what the situation was like here. Everyone sort of went into like apocalypse mode. So there was a lot of like people who were stockpiling a lot of things. So if you went into the supermarkets in England at the very start of the first lockdown in about March to April, you could not buy toilet roll. The toilet roll shelves were empty. People were like buying tons of tinned food because tinned food doesn't go off very easily. And people genuinely thought, all this food is going to run out, all this toilet roll is going to run out, I'm going to buy as much of it as I can. Like toilet roll became like such a like sparse item, didn't it? Like if you could find toilet roll in the supermarket, it was like revolutionary. I remember one day me and my mom had to go to maybe 4 or 5 different supermarkets just to find toilet roll. And you just wouldn't believe it. It was the most surreal experience. And I remember
it really was, because like you saw pictures of it on the news of like say really like completely empty supermarket shelves or signs up saying you can only have one item like per customer.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There was so much of that, wasn't it? It was like pasta. Pasta was really hard to find.
Noodles,
rice,
all cleaning supplies,
and
like
detergent.
Painkillers. You couldn't get painkillers because we can buy painkillers in the supermarket like paracetamol, ibuprofen. You couldn't get those either. So I
forgot about that. I forgot
easy,
that. I forgot in supermarkets, because like we say, all of those items, like you couldn't get cleaning wipes, you couldn't get pasta, you couldn't get tomato puree, you couldn't then get baking supplies because everybody was just baking and buying flour in case bread ran out, then they could make bread. So supermarkets had to generally label saying this is an item that you can only buy one of. You can only buy 1 or 2 of these to stop people from
the crazy thing about it was all just panic. So there was never a shortage of anything. So it's not like this was caused because we actually ran out of certain things, and there was never a shortage of anything. Like the various supermarkets and different people of authority kept saying on the news, like, nothing is going to run out, everything's absolutely fine. But because some people start stockpiling, and then
everybody then does it,
they're stockpiling and they start, and it just increases. I remember my family accidentally stockpiled once because we've got 2 small supermarkets in our village, and I was in the village and I went into on the supermarkets, and they had some of the things we'd run out of. So they had cleaning sprays and antibacterial, antiviral sprays and painkillers and toilet rolls, and I knew we had none of those, so I bought those items. And then when I got home, my parents had also been to the supermarket that day, exact same supermarket in the village, and got the exact same items, and we were like, oh my god, we've now accidentally stockpiled. We thought the people in our village, we live in a very small village, like we know the people that work in the shop, they're going to think this was planned, that they sent, that my parents went on a trip and then I went later in the day, so that we could get numerous items. But yeah, it didn't last too long. It was probably only a couple of weeks before it started
it was like something in a movie. And I've got videos like on my Snapchat saved where like I went to the supermarket with my mum, and obviously now it's so normal to queue outside of shops, but we had never ever had to do that any time in the UK. or anywhere. I don't think, not even when it's really busy, you just would go in and it was really busy. But I've got videos of me and my mum waiting outside the supermarket in a huge queue, like looping around the car park because there's so many people waiting to actually get in. And it was such a surreal experience. I remember it just being like really feeling like I was in a movie. It didn't feel real.
I don't know whether the same happened in Austria, but then most supermarkets started like a time in the morning. So for the very first hour that the shop was open, it was only for elderly people and people who worked, like people who were key workers, so people that worked in
doctors or
like,
yeah,
police, etc. And so I think that was so that, for example, that there were you didn't have elderly people having to deal with all of the queuing and also being in a more busy shop, and also so that these people could have access to the items that were running out. Because I just remember seeing videos that would go like around the news, around social media, of like, you know, a nurse who's just come off of an 18-hour shift at a coronavirus ward in a hospital, and then can't find food in the supermarket because other people have just been stockpiling. And she was like, well, I couldn't go this morning, I've had to come at the end of the day because of work, and then not being able to buy like basic food things. So say most supermarkets started this like hour in the morning where people got like priority access.
My supermarket even had, like, our Waitrose had a little section at the back where they had taken items off the shelf that were running out. So they had like pasta and bread and toilet rolls and things, and you had to show them like your NHS ID, or you had to be an elderly person to actually buy them. You couldn't just go up and say, I can see some toilet roll there, I want it. You had to be like, I need it, I'm a key worker, can I please have it? But it was really surreal. And even like the whole like coronavirus pandemic, I remember like at this, and even now, like, you read so many times in history or in school about all these big historical events that happened, things like the world wars or famines and all this, and you think like, imagine what it would have been like to experience something like that. And this was the first time in my life, I don't know if you feel the same, that I have ever experienced something that is going to go down in history. Like, coronavirus will be talked about for years. I can already see in schools, it's going to be like, if it's a business, for example, an exam question could be like, how did coronavirus impact the economy? Or this is going to be something that we tell our grandkids. They'll be like, what were you doing in 2020 for the pandemic? Absolutely crazy.
This is my it's a joke, my dad says, but like I worked all throughout like that first lockdown because I work in a bakery, and that bakery counted as like an essential business because it was a food supplier. And then we were also like getting rid of all of so not just bread, but like all of the food supplies and things we had in the cafe, and because like we almost have direct access to suppliers, we were getting things like milk and eggs and things in that we would normally be using in the bakery, and then also flour and things. So these are the things that were running out in supermarkets, but because we were getting them from a business end as opposed to a customer, and we were doing loads of food things, and we were just doing delivery. So we were doing like loads of orders and then delivering them, and because most of them went out in like cars and vans, but like we would do some on foot because we were mostly going like in our village and then the villages around us. And my dad would always say like genuinely, he and my mum would help out because they were like, we've not got anything else to do, we'll happily walk some orders around. And my dad delivered one order to one of our like elderly neighbours down our road. And this neighbour was like so sort of like, oh yeah, it's so kind of you to have delivered it, that he wrote a letter and addressed it to my dad. And literally that's like the one thing, considering my brother and I, so my brother works there as well, we worked for like 3 months almost every day in this bakery. My dad delivered one order, and he
got a proper letter
like, this is going in my like box of memories so that when I die I hand it on and everyone's gonna think that he was like some
NHS hero, national hero
during the pandemic, because he has this letter of thanks for volunteering from this neighbour. So he's like, right, I've done my bit.
That's so funny. I mean, how did you actually find lockdown itself? Because it was a really weird time, wasn't it? Like so obviously from March to June you weren't allowed to see anyone. You were on house arrest pretty much. You had to be in your house unless you were doing your form of exercise for the day. You were allowed to go on a walk, or you were going to the supermarket.
The UK had really almost like ridiculous restrictions on your daily exercise. You could go out once a day
for a 20-minute run or an hour walk.
To go out twice, and you're not allowed to sit on a bench, you're not allowed to stop, you're not allowed to drive to go and do any form of exercise.
You have to leave your house, keep running for 20 minutes and come back. You can't stop. It was really restrictive. But I remember so everybody, it became a bit of a meme, didn't it? I'm assuming this is a worldwide thing. It wasn't just a UK specific thing, but everybody started picking up new hobbies, didn't they? And a lot of people were doing like baking or something like this. What was your hobby? What did you do?
I weirdly didn't have one.
You didn't have one the entire lockdown? You didn't have one?
Because the lockdown was weird for me because I was genuinely working full time.
So baking was yours.
Baking was technically mine. So I didn't do the weird thing of picking up a hobby, and now it's like there's this weird. People now talk about it, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't feel like guilty if you're someone who didn't pick up a new skill or a new hobby over lockdown, because people are like, I've wasted my lockdown, I didn't learn another language or something. And also normally most of the things that people did, like baking banana bread was the classic in the UK. That's like the most standard thing that my mum bakes at home already. So to be fair, mine was hot cross buns, because it was around Easter time. I think I baked probably 5 or 6 batches of hot cross buns.
Wow.
Like every week I would bake another one. So that was probably my main lockdown.
I think mine was fitness. Like when I look back on it, I'm like, I'm actually not very sure how I managed to do that, because I really we were really lucky, I think, because the weather's not usually very nice in England, but during that first lockdown it was like summer. It was what, like 20 degrees regularly, maybe 30 degrees sometimes. It was very hot in the UK, so we were like, it was easier to do the first lockdown because it wasn't as dark and cold. But I started doing this like fitness program, and then started another challenge or something, where for 2 months I did 6 workouts. I did 2 workouts every day for 6 days a week. So in the space of a week I would work out 12 times, and it wasn't like easy workouts. It was like 40-minute legs and bum, and then like a 20-minute HIIT workout straight afterwards, or like an ab thing with an arms thing as well, where the woman who was doing it, if I try and do one of our workouts now, just one of them, I physically can't get through them because they're so hard. And I look back, and I remember at the time being like, oh, like I still haven't seen any improvements. And now I look back and I'm like, that is the most shredded I have ever looked. Like I was starting to get abs. Like I was actually getting abs. So that was my like way of doing it. But like now when I look back, I'm like, I don't really know how I was doing that so much. And like I remember even my dad at the time being like, maybe you need to calm down. Why are you doing so many of them so quick? But there was nothing else to do, because you don't realize, like, sitting in the house all day, there's only so much TV I can watch. And it became like my routine of, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to have a protein shake, and I'm going to work out. There's my morning done. And it became like a sort of, how people say it takes like however many hours to build a habit. It just became so habitual for me in the end. But it stopped very shortly after lockdown ended, because obviously I was going out and I was able to actually see people. So I wasn't, I didn't have the time to work out twice a day, every day. So
I forgot that I've done running for like a few years, but I always tend to fall out of it as a habit when I go back to uni. And at the very start of lockdown, my parents, who are both in their 50s, and they're very fit people, but they've never run, and they've always said like they would never ever do running. Like we cycle a lot and we always pass runners on the road, and my mum's like, what a joyless sport, like why would you ever want to run? And then suddenly my parents, or I think it was my dad, was like, I want to start running. I think there was something to do with like it being, I think people were seeing sort of coronavirus as something that would affect you more if you were less fit, if you had,
definitely,
the system wasn't as good. And saying my parents are both pretty fit, but they just had this like, we've got to do more. And because I'm an okay runner, but at this point I'd not run for quite a while, so I became their running coach and coach them in what we have, like there was an app called a Couch to 5K.
For so long I thought that was coach to 5K, like
yeah,
you have a coach to 5K, and when someone said couch I was like, it's not couch, like what, why are you saying that? But then I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. They're going from making you lie on the sofa all day to being able to run 5K. That makes so much more sense.
So yeah, that feels like a big achievement, because they were very, my dad was very committed, my mum was very reluctant, and anyone who's going to start running having never run before, it's a tricky one. And then I think round about May, I think it was around about May, they ran their first 5K, and now they're regular runners. They run more than me.
Yeah.
They run if not like every day, every other day.
Well, I mean, do you remember those? Because there was a lot of challenges coming out, wasn't there, during lockdown? And I think one of the ones that everyone was doing was C5, tag 5, do 5 or something. So somebody would run 5K. I don't know how it started, but you would see somebody run 5K, like you would see a post about it on Instagram. They would tag 5 people to then also run 5K. And then obviously if you got tagged, you had to then run and do the same process again. So I did get tagged to do the 5K run thing. So I did actually do a 5K run, but very reluctantly, because at the time I didn't run at all. I wasn't a runner. And I really impressed myself, I managed to do it in like 27 minutes. And I was like, considering I don't run, 27 minutes for 5K is not very bad.
Yeah, because I think that one, because this was also at that kind of time, lots of fundraising things were happening. I think that was I can't remember what charity that was raising money for, but I think
I donated it to.
You had to donate £5.
Yeah, do you remember the old guy who walked 100 laps of his garden?
Yeah, the biggest thing of that lockdown, that first lockdown. And I told a couple of classes about this, but there was the man who's sadly passed away.
He passed away this year, didn't he?
His name was, what was he?
I think it was called Captain Tom
Moore, and then he became Captain Tom Moore, and then he's Captain Sir Tom Moore, and so he's a national hero. So he's a 99-year-old man who wanted to raise some money because our National Health Service is technically a charity. Well, as in, so it's funded by the government and then supported by charities, and he wanted to raise money for NHS charities, and so he was going to do, because he was about to turn 100, he turned 100 in, I'm guessing, April or May, maybe
sometime,
April. And so he was going to do 100 lengths of his garden. Obviously he's a 99-year-old man, he's got a walker, so he walked 100,
very difficult for him.
Yeah, so he walked 100 lengths of his garden over a series of days, and he wanted to raise something like £1,000. I'm going to look this up to see how much he actually raised.
He got so much money.
Then got lots of media attention. So he completed it, say before his birthday, and I'll come back to you in a minute.
According to Google.
But yeah, so he then, it was like, because all you were hearing about in the news was, bad statistics about coronavirus, and the whole country really latched on to this guy because he's such a lovely man. Like, he was being interviewed on so many different news channels, and he was just so, you just wanted him to be your grandpa. He was so lovely. And he's an army officer, so he's one of those who's got loads and loads of stories of different wars that he's fought in. And yeah, so in the end, he actually raised over £30 million. So he wanted
ridiculous.
He wanted to raise £1,000 by his 100th birthday.
But instead got the millions.
Got that 30 million. So then he became a captain. So he was given the title of a captain.
Did he meet the Queen?
Yeah, and then the Queen knighted
him,
because I don't know if you've ever heard of various prominent British figures who are either referred to as Sir or Dame, and that's an award that you can be given by the Queen, and that's the highest rank you can get. So then he was knighted by the Queen. So the Queen came to his sort of house, and it's this picture from a distance of her, because it's like a big ceremony thing. he did amazing things. Like he then recorded a charity single.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was with Michael Ball, topped most of the UK charts. He was the oldest person to achieve a UK #1. And then I can't remember how many. Oh yeah, so then because he only turned 100, and he received over 150,000 birthday cards. And there's this amazing picture of like this big hall near where he lives, where all the birthday cards were, because so many people had sent him a birthday card.
That's so cute, isn't it? Imagine trying to read 150,000 birthday cards. That is ridiculous.
He is now definitely sort of like one of the most famous figures in the UK, and so sadly he passed away from coronavirus, which is so unfair.
Yeah.
Last month. So he made it a whole year through the pandemic at the age of 100, and then got it in February.
So sad, isn't it?
Had a legendary last year.
Very true, very true. And maybe a bit of a personal question, but I know that somebody who asked us to talk about coronavirus asked us to like how our mental health was like through the pandemic, like how we actually managed to get through it. I suppose. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Like how did you cope during lockdown, I suppose?
Yeah, I honestly I don't remember what happened, or like I can remember the whole of the first lockdown to about June, and I really don't know what I did from like June to September.
I'm the same, you know.
Period, it's just a blur. I genuinely don't know what I did, but I was quite lucky that I had this job to do, because it meant that from having come straight home from university, I was then working every single day, so that I was like filling my time, and I felt like I had a purpose. I think that was the most difficult thing of that like first lockdown, when you're in between university terms. It's like I don't have a purpose. I don't know what to do with my time. So I was like, as much as it was a really difficult job, like it was very tiring and it was a lot of effort, and obviously quite stressful having to constantly adapt. I was like, I'm so glad that I have a purpose. I then did my university term from home, so again that kept me like occupied, and then I just don't know what I did from June onwards.
I mean, June's where, so basically for me, so obviously we're both on our year abroad for uni. I think we've talked about this in one of the episodes before. I was supposed to go to Spain in first semester, and I think I found out about June time that I wasn't allowed to go, that I wouldn't be going to Spain. Or maybe it was like a little bit after, maybe it was August time, because I think it was like just before I was meant to go. And I was like really upset about it, and I'm quite a headstrong. I don't know if that's the right word in this context, but I was like, there is no point in me sitting here crying about the fact I'm not going to Spain. I need to do something productive with my time instead. So I managed to get a job in a hotel bar, which at the time it was open because hotels had been reopened after the first lockdown. And I worked like really long, hard hours at this hotel. Like I would work 5 or 6, 10 to 12 hour shifts a week. I was doing maybe like 60 hours a week in this hotel, and it's not an easy job. I don't know if anybody's worked in a bar before, but it can be really stressful, especially during the pandemic, when, you know, all things were heightened anyway, and people were getting, you know, angry at you for little mistakes that you were doing. And because especially there was then rules came into place of like, you can go out to eat, but you can't be on the same table as people from different households, and people would very obviously come in and break those rules. And it was then on us to be like, I'm sorry, you physically cannot sit there, you are breaking the law. And they weren't happy about that, they weren't having it. So you would get a lot of people who were very angry at you, and you were genuinely just doing your job. So I think that June time, that's the only thing I can actually remember doing, is working in that bar. But they closed again because we had another mini lockdown, didn't we, at the end of November, December? Was it in November went into lockdown?
I think so. I can't remember, because I remember the tier 4 system came into place in the middle of December, because it was literally the day that I got home from Austria, was when we went into tier 4, so which was this like, you know, very high, very, very, very high risk. And I can't remember whether that class is an official lockdown, because for all intents and purposes tier 4 was a lockdown.
It might not have been like an official one, to be fair, but I definitely remember the hotel closing because the government had said bars and restaurants can't be open. Maybe it was just to do with the tier system, though. Maybe they said
the tier system.
Yeah, maybe they said that in Newcastle it was too serious, so they had to close or something like that. Yeah.
Because we went in where I live went into tier 4 literally the day I got home. So basically full lockdown, international travel banned, all of that kind of stuff. And then the UK government did a pretty bad thing by, in the run up to Christmas, kept saying that they were going to do this like 5-day period of basically no restrictions, to give people like this beacon of hope at the end of the year, so that like you're basically going to have 5 days where you could go and see all your family, have Christmas with your family like you normally would, and it would be kind of like 5 days of freedom and then back into restrictions. So everyone was like planning all of their Christmas parties, their Christmas gatherings, planning to go and see family, ordering in like all of their food and stuff for Christmas, and then for most of the country, I think this was still in the tier system, so there might have been some places in the country that still got to have that, but then for the majority of the country, the government then had to say like, oh, for Christmas, no, you can't do that anymore. So obviously people were, it obviously made sense to do, but people were so incredibly angry that the government had basically given everyone hope, and they'd been so certain, saying this will happen, you will get Christmas, we will do this. Whereas if they'd said like, we're going to see if it's possible, then it wouldn't have gotten people's hopes up. And then obviously you had issues with people just say breaking the law anyway, because they'd already made all of these plans.
I remember that causing quite a lot of uproar, I suppose, because people were saying, obviously I'm not particularly religious, so I didn't, I kind of sometimes forget that Christmas is a very religious holiday, obviously very Christian holiday, very maybe Catholic. I don't really know the difference between the two, but definitely a Christian holiday. And there was people saying like, people from like Muslim communities, or I don't know, like Hindu communities maybe, where they're like, we had all these holidays throughout the year that you wouldn't let us do. You had no consideration for our religious holidays, but now it's a Christian one. You're like, oh, we've got to open up and got to let people be more lenient, and it wasn't fair.
You remember being in the news. So people were saying that like you've made this big exception for this particularly Christian holiday, even though Christmas is generally, I think, to some extent celebrated by most people. The UK even say just as a non-religious holiday almost, but say it was like this consideration had been given specifically to a Christian holiday and not to other holidays that had happened like in the run-up between like summer and then Christmas. So the government did not handle Christmas very well, and so then there were these areas in the country where you could have mixing over Christmas. So where I live, it was completely cancelled. In some places it was reduced to just the 23rd, 24th and 25th. I think you could still mix to an extent, and then like the first week of January hit and cases just like skyrocketed because of that short period of time over Christmas. It was like, was it worth it? No, like it was not worth having that short relaxed period for then what it did in January, because then we've essentially just gone back. I'm sure everyone everyone went back into lockdown in January. So stores were closed. It was literally back to square one. The only difference this time is that the vaccines rollout had started in the UK.
I think it was such a weird, because when I think back to it as well, I just think of like, because we'll talk about it after this, because I think it's really important to highlight, that it wasn't just a horrible time. Like we did get things out of this lockdown period as well. But I think like for me, I just remember being like, so like, that's the worst my anxiety and my mental health has ever been in my life. Just because it was, like I talked about before, it was this very sudden, like, so now you've been living alone with all of your friends, surrounded by all of your friends. And especially at our age, I find that even though I can't speak to my parents and I love my parents, I get on very well with them, there's certain issues that my friends are my support group. So you like thrust out of this situation where you're around your support group all the time, back to living with your parents who sometimes can treat you like their child because you are their child, to not having anyone around you. Then this shift from face-to-face teaching to online uni, where there's not really a structure, nobody knows what they're doing with exams, and it was just sort of like everything was up and down all the time. and so it was a lot of a harder period. But so that we're not talking about all the sad, depressing stuff, what do you think that you got out of the first lockdown or the second lockdown? What do you think Corona has changed in your life for the better?
I genuinely remember like talking to, because I, obviously spending so much time at home. I can remember having conversations with my mum and talking about like the silver linings of lockdown. And I now can't remember what was on our list. But there were definitely things like, say, like the fact that it forced us to do, I don't know, we do lots of things like as a family, so me, my mum, my dad and my brother anyway, but we on the whole got on really well as a four in lockdown, but it forced us to do more things together, like the fact we all started running together, and and also like we were even though we generally go on walks, we were doing that. We've been told we should go on a daily walk, so let's go on a daily walk. We were actually doing it. We were making these efforts at home. So in terms of like, I'm lucky that I have a great relationship with my family. So that time spent at home, apart from the stress of having to try and deal with an online university term, you don't know what you're doing. But that time in between was actually very pleasant at home. You actually really enjoy, obviously ignoring the reasons as to why everyone was forced at home. Like we had a really good time. So the weather was decent. We were spending more time as a family going for walks and things that you don't necessarily do when you've got grown-up children. I'm 20, my brother's 18.
It became so normal so quick though as well, didn't it? Like everybody became really like used to sitting in the house and not really doing anything and being with family.
We were making an effort that we were different. Like I would cook dinner sometimes, my brother would, we were doing like as opposed to every other time I'm at home it's like a little holiday because I'm just visiting between university or being on my year abroad, whereas this was slightly different. And there were other things as well, but I can't remember them, so I'll hand it to you.
I would say that I definitely was able to learn a little bit more about my personality and about like my interests and stuff. So obviously none of the students will know, I had my ex-boyfriend. I was with my ex-boyfriend up until the end of lockdown, and it really was, it was a toxic relationship, so it was good to get out of. But I was with him when I was very young. Like we got together when I was 15, 16, so I never grew up like investing time into my interests, because anytime I had spare time, I just wanted to spend it with him. And I spent so much time and effort into that. I put so much time and effort into that relationship that I never really spent time with myself, I suppose. So it really helped me learn what I was actually interested in and be my own person, I suppose. And that's why I'm now interested in art, and I actually spend time doing that because I know that it's something I'm really interested in, because I was able to spend time on it during the first lockdown. And then getting out of that relationship has meant that I'm now with my current boyfriend, who I'm very happy with. So that was definitely a silver lining out of it for me. What else? I think you like you said as well, like you were just able to really solidify your bonds, your relationships with everybody, because you were spending so much time with family, like your immediate family, I suppose, or your friendship group, whoever you were with. You were able to really solidify that. But the distance between you and everybody else made those relationships stronger as well. I found like I was I would at one point, my grandparents didn't feel comfortable, because obviously they were older, they were more vulnerable, didn't feel comfortable going into food shops. So me and my mum, when we would go food shopping, we would also pick up things from my grandparents as well, and it just made it a bit easier for them. It made them less stressed. So I still got to see my grandparents, but I would drop the food shopping at the door, and I would stand distance and we would have a quick chat. So it was one of those things where, like, because I wasn't able to see them very often, like it made me make more effort to actually stay in contact with people who I actually wanted to see and actually cared about.
And also, and I think another thing that became like clear to us is our we both live in small villages, but in my small village we've got a high street, and high streets are have been struggling for quite a few years in the UK, with big online companies taking over the necessity of like having a high street, having all these small independent businesses, and even though obviously it's been a really, really rubbish time for retail, and especially these like smaller businesses, but it really like emphasize to my family like why we love living in this small village. Like we say, we've got this small supermarket that was like our savior. That we didn't have to get in a car and drive to a supermarket and go into a potentially busy supermarket. We could just walk into our village. Everything we needed really for that time in lockdown, we could get in our little village. And most of the little businesses were starting to do online ordering things, which, perhaps they'd never, there'd been maybe a lot of these businesses have thought, oh, at some point in the future, I'll create a website, I'll start Facebook, but hadn't. It then made them go, right, I need to start having an online presence. And people were almost making more of an effort to support their local businesses because of how much this, all the lockdowns and the closures were affecting mostly like small independent businesses. I know in my village, especially like the few restaurants that were doing takeaways were incredibly popular because everyone was like, I'm not going to order something on Deliveroo, I'm going to go to my local we have got a community centre that always did did Saturday food takeaway, and like we were specifically making an effort to go and use the shops and the services in our village, and it's kind of like put more of an importance, I think, to us and the other people that live in my village. Even in the future we would still choose to go
back
to local businesses. And it's like, we often shopped locally anyway, but like it's just put a bigger emphasis on.
And
I think kind of that effect was seen in other places. Not saying it was an easy time for small businesses on high streets, but I think it's made people value those more.
And I think, it was with this whole mental health thing, because I know I'm not the only person who like really struggled during the lockdowns. I think it was sort of comfort in knowing that this was not just a thing that I was going through. This was like a very big national thing, like, and you were in it with everybody, and like there was a big sense of community. I think especially in England, it was very much like we're in this together. And we did really nice things like every Thursday, I think it was at 6 p.m. or something. If you went outside in your house at 6 p.m. or it was 6 p.m. right? 8 p.m. something like that.
Thursday.
Yeah, the same time every Thursday, people would go outside their doors and they would clap for the NHS. They would hit things off pans, make a lot of noise, and obviously cheer, so that people in the NHS who were fighting and doing long shifts for us to help us as a nation battle coronavirus, they knew that we were so grateful and so supportive and stuff of everything that we were doing. So there was a big sense of community, I think.
I think it's really, really boosted like those feelings of community spirit, because like we've seen lots of stories in the news, like because again of how much rubbish there was in the news and all these like horrifying stories. I think lots of news channels were focusing on trying to find these like nice stories of local community things, and I definitely know in my small village, like down my road, at Christmas they did like a socially distanced carol singing where everyone went down one of the side roads and sung some carols. Someone played music from a speaker from their window, and those kind of things, like sure we could have done before if we'd made an effort, but there'd almost not been that cause to think, let's get the neighbours together and do something. Let's say sit in the garden, like in our with our neighbour in our front garden, in our respective gardens, and have drinks in the evening. And like people didn't think to do that. And then like say community groups, or say things like this, it's called like Clap for Carers, just to like unite you with your with your immediate community. And I think that's something that will continue. Like once or lockdowns and things have finished, like people have got, I think, a much bigger sense of community, especially if you live in a small village or a small town. Everyone's like banded together, almost say, to make an effort to keep that like community spirit alive when everyone's stuck inside.
Definitely. I think we might have to wrap it up this episode though.
I have no idea how I think it's been a while.
Yeah, me too. But if you had a similar experience or a different experience, we'd love to hear. Obviously, neither of us were, I mean, you were here a little bit for lockdown here, but I didn't really experience any lockdown here, especially back in when it first started. So we'd love to hear what your experience was like, what it was like here in Austria, for example. So please comment down below, let us know how you found lockdown, how you found coronavirus, anything, maybe not so much all the negative stuff. Maybe if we try and stick to let us know a few things that you got out of coronavirus. So things that changed in your life for the better, some positive things that have happened because of coronavirus. Thanks again for listening.
Let's share positive coronavirus effects in the comments.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
That'd be a nice thing to do. Yeah, so let us know your positive corona things. And yeah, thanks so much for watching again. Hopefully there'll be another episode this week as well, just to make up for our lack last week. But yeah.
Time.
Yes.
We need
adios.
to